So welcome to our seminar. And the title of this talk today is a little bit misleading, just to trick you into coming. Because what I wanted to do is to kind of land at this topic of play with a few roundabouts. It's not, it's not about gaming and playing and being playful per se as a main focus, but more a question I want to add that this play understood in a particular way might be an answer for. There might be other answers, and the answer of play is like strangely complex. And whenever we are engaged in the conversation about playfulness, we see that it's an immensely complicated or complex aspect of intelligence. And we do have a class that is taught by Weaver at the School of Thinking, which unpacks this complexity. And it's no wonder that being playful and playing games is a mark of intelligence, because it's not a simple activity. So what I will want to land at is like how this idea of playing is possibly like a cognitive ability or umbrella that wraps many layers of things that need to be happening simultaneously in the activity for the activity, social activity of this learning nature to be truly intelligent. So it's not really like about playing as a starting point. The starting point is this. If you think about this, think about it as a scale. And there is even numbers from 1 to 10, and one end of the scale would be like, it would be nice if you were like able to locate in yourself an experience or a memory or kind of like a state of mind in which let's speak about work, okay? So in which the way you feel you are working is like this. You are kind of repetitive and predictable and standardized, and kind of the word that comes to my mind is fossilized, like you are like you are very efficient. So it's not that you are kind of dead, basically. It's not that like you are alive, and actually all the things that you are supposed to be achieving, you are achieving in a very parameterized way. Okay, so it's a setup that is geared towards the effect that is supposed to be there. But you feel that like all the feelings that you have are not so internally pleasant. You wouldn't call yourself alive. You don't feel alive. Okay, you feel kind of unenchanted. Let's call it this way. Yes. So this would be like if you are able to locate a memory or the feeling that sometimes perhaps you've been processing activities in this way. On the other side of the scale would be a situation, again, a memory in which you remember you being engaged in a similar type of tasks, but in a completely different, very alive, very vibrant, very curious and thrilled state of mind. Okay. The situation is that it might be that the task is similar, but you are changed, and obviously you are responding to something, or something is responding to you. So not only you are changed, an aspect or like a lot in the situation is different. So the basic topic that I wanted to address today is this spectrum, okay? For which approaching things playfully might be, under certain circumstances, a solution. It's not a certain solution, and it can also go wrong. So it's not like an easy, what I want to say is, okay, so to be explorative, curious, creative, and vibrant, let's play, and then we will have it. It's not so simple, yes? But the thing is that if we would like our project, educational activity together, done by, you know, like between the students and the instructors and so on, to be able to kind of sustainably induce a state of mind in which we are active and creative and feel alive and curious and in an active curiosity, then this setup might lead to that. Okay, so that's the question. This screen is the question. And now to kind of calibrate it and to illustrate what is at stake here in terms of school situation, okay, and like why does this scale, if it's not self-explanatory, why is it so important that we are able to systematically and kind of reliably put this I'm again having the slider here, put the slider like to the right, yes, that we like that our ability as an organization and as a group, that we have methods and we have approaches and we know how to keep it on the right rather than on the left for the entire social system that we are. Yeah? What's at stake at school? Here is a quote from a video that we have on the website. Maciek in his introduction is speaking about that. So just to bring a voice that we already have on the website. If it works, you should hear it now.
I mean, I was learning stuff. I had good teachers, you know, looking back at some of them. I did learn knowledge, but I didn't care at the time. So many interesting things that I was missing because I didn't perceive them as interesting, right? Like, you know, physics, right? There's nothing more basic than that. And yet I spent the whole time, you know, when I had the chance to learn physics, I spent the whole time thinking about, this is about, you know, taking an equation and, you know, kind of transforming it to discover how fast a ball is falling on the ground, right? So either I wasn't able, or my teachers were not able, or we as a system were not able to actually, you know, get interested in that. I haven't got the idea. I mean, I know all the explanations that are normally invoked. I'm not quite sure which one is the right one. I do know one thing, though. I mean, I've had a very, very, you know, transforming experience already as an adult. And so I found myself working on a series of workshops, the group of 15 teenagers, and they were really bright people with really interesting opinions. They were vividly arguing until they sat down for a workshop. Like it was like as if a switch, and then the brain stopped working. I think this is what happens to us. This is what happened to me at school for some reason. I can't quite put my finger on why it happened, but I kind of played by the rules of the game without much wondering what is the actual relevance of this question that the teacher is asking to the world I live in. I had no idea about that being interesting at all when I was a teenager.
Okay, So what he is illustrating here in my view is somehow, and it's like almost sounding mysterious, that you have a group of people who are, you know, like in themselves naturally creative, alive, explorative, and so on, as long and only as long as they are finding themselves in a situation which is called the school or workshop, an educational situation, which, as if, you know, like it's funnily ironic, because it's supposed to be like feeding all those curiosity and creativity and so on, except that the opposite happens. So because then they turn into something different and they don't care about those things anymore, and they are not interested in, or the teacher is not, like whoever is not, everybody like kind of moves to the left of the scale, because the situation kind of makes it so. Yes, and here I'm not really kind of distinguishing who is doing what. Is it like the teachers or the students? Supposedly, for simplicity, it is everybody. It's kind of like all elements of the system kind of turn into this machinery that kind of starts feeling passive. Is this kind of problematics something relatable to you at this stage, or do you
have? I just want to make sure this slide and this spectrum between left and right is to do with the human engagement having to do with the educational context, yes?
Yes. So, like in general, you could say like this is a spectrum that is like possibilities in a human being and in a like state of being.
Yes. So this is something that I want to make more clear, because I was thinking about my experience, and I had quite a few different domains of experience. One of them, like, is being an engineer and developing hardware or software as something which is on one end very explorative and creative. On the other end, it requires predictability, standardization, being very punctuate, and really be working like a scientist in a laboratory, keeping track of everything that you do and repeating exactly what you are doing and developing procedures, etc., etc. And this is one domain of experience in engineering or solving problems in math or stuff like this. Another domain, which is completely different, is me having the hobby of being a chef pâtissier. It is not like any other cooking, because patisserie requires really very accurate processes that needs to be kept very, very with a lot of constraints and restrictions, and only over them there is a certain kind of a creative, the creativity and the predictability or efficiency needs to come together. So this is in the general. It's I think that there is a certain combination which is required in order to do things that are alive, I would say.
Yes.
But in the educational sense, we are talking about human interaction.
Okay, it's a very, very good point that you are making, and you are asking about that, because like it's indeed pinpoints like the distinction that I should have made. I like what I'm speaking about is not something that some people, like, for example, when they read the description of our school, future school, Buckminster College, they have this association that this school will, like the kind of profiling association, that this school will be more artistic. It's maybe kind of, you know, we even had those conversations that is it like more like theater type of a school, or kind of like, you know, like artists education and so on. So not at all, also yes, but it's not on this level at all, yes. So like, and what you speak about this patisserie and engineering is a very nice distinction, because let's take it that we are speaking about a class in math, okay? Very precise, and what you are learning is an advanced mathematical skill of like arriving at a theorem of something, okay? So it's not like this kind of, you know, like a funky class in self-expression, creative theater and dancing around.
Yes, it's very disciplined, yes.
Yeah, so
extremely disciplined.
Exactly, or very precise, making the you know, the patisserie the way it's supposed to be, and it has to grow in a particular like number of, you know, millimeters, whatever, you know. So this so here what I mean as this scale is not different types of human activity. What I mean is this inner sense of your being, okay, psychologically. And you can, and this is the whole point, you can feel like you can be 10 out of 10 in this scale while doing the mathematical theorem, okay? And this is exactly the point, yes? So we are really speaking here about the scale in human experience, yes, and not about the particular type of activities that the school will be doing. We are not speaking only about the school, we are speaking about human beings. And of course, in the context of education, yes, and this is why I'm putting this example that Maciek is speaking about, that we feel like that at school. But the question is more general. How do you, in a social system, reliably coordinate our activities such that this human, you know, like it's a nice term, human energy is high, yes? It's exactly this. There's this vibrancy that people feel alive, and that people feel joyful and creative, and you know, there's enthusiasm, there is like high level of openness for interaction, for ideas, for having new associations, and so on and so on. Okay, so that would be the question. How do we do that? Yeah, and yeah, speaking about our school in particular.
It's a very interesting approach, because I do notice having younger kids that in a classic environment, playfulness seems contradictory to progress. The kid can't progress because he's still very playful, and it's, I think that's the reason why things are not working. And I think that's the challenge that we have with the Buckminster College, making sure that the playfulness is on the same level as progress.
It's not even the same. Like
it's actually the same.
It's the, you know, this is why I was asking you to kind of locate in yourself the experience, because for example, like you could think, like you could make it into the dichotomy like this, that, you know, there is like serious progress and serious work, and there is this kind of goofy playfulness that is kind of stupid but relaxed but also funny, and it's not what I'm speaking about, you know. So imagine that you are in a very bright team of like that is solving a mathematical theorem for the first time ever, okay, and there you feel that, you know, that would be this kind of play, because you know, like at least what I'm kind of driving towards is that for this vibrancy to happen, there has to be much more going on between those people, that only the precision and only the high level accuracy, but also this precision and high level accuracy is an important ingredient. If this quality is not high enough intellectually, you know, this whole intelligence of the situation is not mobilized. Yes, we are being kind of stupid, yes, together, and possible, but not in this kind of vibrant sense that becomes like really creative and really kind of frontier of our like intellect that is fully awakened. Yes, so that would be the state, and it's for this context to kind of disambiguate those different possibilities. It's good that we would think about like a really kind of actually not an art class, but something very like physics or math. Okay, just to understand the possibility here.
I think it's very important to define this playfulness.
Yeah,
to make sure that we exactly know what is playfulness instead of the act of playing. There's a big difference. And what I refer to in being the problem in current situations is actually the playfulness, the mindset, not the actual playing, but a few levels before that. And that seems to be an issue. We experience it by ourselves as well. So.
I think that an entry point to this, it's a huge topic, and I think that the entry point, in order to start to understand, I was just while you were speaking, I was starting to kind of formulate what would be needed in order for something like this to happen. So. One not entirely processed right now thing that came to my mind is that it's first and foremost a thing of an emotional capacity of all the actors that are being involved. It's not. Of course, it requires also intellectual competences and creative competences, but first and foremost, it is like motivational, emotional, is that this is what you do. And this is what you do, I mean the activity of being involved in this school, in this happening. And I think as a first principle, what I would suggest is something that I was trying to speak about in this school of thinking in the course of game thinking, in the part which is usually the last part of the course, so it's kind of condensed. But if we and the thing is that I believe that the entry point or the door into something like this is that the activity, I'm coming to the school to do whatever I'm doing, yes, whether it's I'm a teacher or I'm an artist in residence or whatever, my activity cannot be instrumental. What do I mean by that? Is that the activity is done for the sake of the activity and not for a secondary instrumental goal like gaining a salary, having social contacts, or putting an interesting something in my resume, or whatever it is, or just having, I don't know, spending my time because I don't have anything else to do. It must not be instrumental. It needs to be an activity for the sake of this very sense of activity, and this, and according to my understanding, this is like the definition of a definition of a game. Yes, a game in the wider sense of in the wider sense of the word. So it's not about like playing football or playing chess or computer game or whatever. It's like playing or living as playing. And I think this understanding is for me the entry point to is the entry point to this riddle or to this issue. And I believe that this can be created. Yes, it's like it's creating an ecosystem, an environment, or a stage And of course, it depends a lot on the people that participate, yes?
Yeah, so what I would want to suggest is that yeah, I agree completely that it depends on like the ability of enough people in the group to be able to sustain a very complex cognitive operation. Because you make it sound simple, but this kind of playfulness while acting, while being in a social situation, while being in a like multi-layered social situation, is an extremely complex cognitive ability. Extremely complex. It's like a you know high peak of intelligence that you are able to do that. Yes, and the like what I want to propose now that I would like work, because I have a few kind of books and few ideas that I want to bring in, but with this question, like we will arrive to this question in the end. Okay, so it's kind of like a tour through, I don't know, 4 or 5 books from different angles. So it's kind of like a chain of associations, and they are not speaking about the play and the game. And we'll like, I want to take all those things that will like collect them, and then we'll come back to this question. What would it actually mean? And it's like, yeah, it's difficult to like, I know that you teach the whole course on it, yes, and the thing is, it's very difficult to pinpoint. You feel it, and this is exactly why this scale, for example, you know those moments that you are on them, and you know how high intensity they are, yeah, but it's like so much going on that it's like really like, you know, it's like very layered cake, like in like to stay in the patisserie department, yes, like very precise and very like it has many different layers of a particular kind of ratio between each other to create this sense. And the you know, not randomly, we want to like, in terms of our, you know, organizational goals, we want to like, you know, like produce those cakes, yes, and keep this quality. So it's important to understand how it's done, yes. But what I have prepared for today is actually that we will go there from this left side, okay? So like to understand this passivity, how this passivity happens, and kind of start collecting different understandings or ideas from a particular genre of thinking, which is more kind of psychological. And because those are a few books that kind of like came to me, more passages of books in an association, like when I was thinking about this problem, you know, how those things kind of combine. So the first thing, and it was actually the one that provoked me to propose this title, is the book. Just a moment. This book. I was reading this book. It's about something different completely. Actually, it's about power. But it had like 2 pages that really like I highlighted like them entirely, because they were like very to the point in the relation to this question that I'm asking. Okay, so okay, this is the guy, a Swiss psychiatrist. We are in the territory of all sorts of analysts and even psychiatrists occasionally. So it will be this kind of a crowd today. And this guy, it's a short read that apparently is one of the canonic books in psychoanalyst training, that they will understand the question of power and how power is generated and kind of becomes addictive, becomes an issue, becomes a problem or a feature of the situation that they are finding themselves in the relationship with their patients, that it's not avoidable, but needs to be kind of, therefore it's like, we cannot pretend it's not there, and therefore we need to like understand what it is and how to work with it with the primary task of the situation in mind, meaning that the situation, even though or with the fact that the power is involved, is actually serving the client as it is supposed to be serving, and not other goals, like for example the sense of powerness, powerfulness on the side of the analyst. So here is a passage which kind of like brings us back to like this left side, meaning it's a very complex description, which for me it was very very informative, an idea how to describe how, speaking in archetypes and archetypal type of thinking, how this sense of helplessness or dependency or this kind of passiveness in social situations is created. And this is what he's describing. He's saying that in all professions that are helping professions, and this means like teacher, priest, medical doctor, analyst, all sorts of people who are like, the situation is that there is one person who is being helped and educated or healed or supported by the other. He's explaining the mechanism of power, appearance of power, and he says that power is a kind of like a side effect or just an effect of the fact that an archetype, which is like axis archetype, which has two sides, is in play. Okay, meaning that there is an archetypal situation created with two sides of it being played by two different actors. And his claim is that power between people is a product of any such constructed archetype being played by two different social actors. Okay, and then when each is taking one kind of end of the stick, the power, it's a power of the archetype, basically. One has a power over another one because the archetype is powerful. Yes, so this is his description. And he's saying like this, that in these professions, the problem of split archetype appears, whether the polarity be healthy, sick, conscious, unconscious, socially sick, socially healthy, and so on. The power is when the archetype is split clearly between two people. And his recommendation how to deal with it and how to make it healthy is that this person who is standing on this more powerful side, this person's psychological task is to kind of bring both sides of the polarity of this archetype into their own self. Okay, so like actually actively counterbalance the split, that understand the entire to understand the entire archetype and to play both sides of it. Yes, and here is the explanation which applies to teachers specifically. Okay, so he writes, the problem of the split archetype is also found in another field of activity, which we must count among the ministering professions. I refer to that of teacher. The teacher-student encounter runs parallel to an inner tension between the states of being a knowledgeable adult and an unknowing child. In every adult, there is a child who constantly leads us to new things. The adult's knowledge makes him rigid and inaccessible to innovation. The unknowing child's irrational experimentation, his naive openness, must be retained as a potential in every adult if he is to remain emotionally alive. Thus, the adult is never completely grown up. If he is to be somewhat healthy psychically, he must always keep a certain childlike unknowingness. Among the general public, school teachers are often accused of being infantile and unrealistic. This is not completely untrue. If one has many dealings with teachers, one is soon, one is soon reluctantly forced to admit a certain childishness and infantilism in their behavior. There must, after all, be something in the state of childishness that fascinates the teacher, or else, how could he bear to spend his entire working time among children? A dynamic teacher must have a certain dynamic childishness in himself, just as a doctor must have a vital relationship to the pole of illness. So he is speaking about this, how it's working well when you keep both sides of the polarity within your own psyche, working with within an archetype. And here comes the description of this passiveness, yes, as this left side of the polarity. One often meets teachers who seem to have lost every trace of childishness, who have even fewer childish traits than the average healthy adult. Such teachers, and this is kind of like a classical school setup that we are describing in this lost interest, lost curiosity, and so on. Such teachers have become only teachers who confront unknowing children almost as their enemy. They complain that children know nothing and do not wish to learn. Their nerves are torn by their students' childishness and lack of self-control. For this kind of a teacher, children are the other, that which he himself wishes never to be. Such teachers derive a certain pleasure from demonstrating their power over children, tormenting them and keeping them in line with carefully calculated mathematical averages. The archetype by which the good teacher is fascinated is that of the knowing adult and unknowing child. A good teacher must simulate the knowing adult, stimulate a knowing adult in each child, so to speak, just as the doctor must arouse the patient's inner healing factor. But this can only happen if the teacher does not lose touch with his own childishness. In practical terms, this means, for example, that he must not lose spontaneity in his teaching and must let himself be guided somewhat by his own interest. He must not only transmit knowledge, but also awaken the thirst for knowledge in the children. Something is split. The teacher's childishness is repressed. Okay, so you understand the. It's a complex argument, but what it is saying that the approach is basically through the idea of archetypes, that when people are in kind of relocated into an archetypal situation, it works more like kind of psychic attractor, that you are pulled into this logic altogether, yes, and this logic, since it has polarities, it can either push people to both sides of this polarity, resulting in passivity, and all this kind of helplessness, and one side active, one side passive, and so on. And he's also describing in other professions and teachers, like, for example, medical doctors and patients that are completely helpless and losing all their responsibility for their own health and so on. Or actually, for this vitality and aliveness to be present in a situation, both sides of the archetypal spectrum needs to be present in both sides of the social situation. And if we are being teachers and we are responsible for this situation, this would mean that this, this childishness, this creativity, this playfulness, and so on, must not be projected out on the other. Yes, meaning it has to be kind of contained, and so that in his kind of dynamic explanation, the other side will become kind of. He has this very nice word, constellated. The children remain children, and the knowing adult is no longer constellated in them. So in order to constellate the knowledge on the other side, you have to constellate within you the child. If this is understandable. So this is kind of like an opening narrative on which to which I have a few associations from different books. But at this stage, do you have anything you would like to comment? Or
yes,
yeah, go ahead.
Yes, this is a kind of a formulation of an issue, but it doesn't seem to me that it concretely points towards it. In an abstract manner, he points what is the desirable situation, but I can immediately imagine if you read this, you have a bunch of teachers now or prospective teachers, and you want to tell them something about it. And you explain everything that you explain now. It's a wonderful explanation, and people would most of the time choose a certain shortcut in order to get close to this kind of prospect or image. So what I want to say is that what I am missing is that it needs to be authentic, because I think that not even between teachers and pupils, but between parents and children, parents become infantile, but not authentically infantile, which is positive, but they just play a kind of image, a self-image of being childish in order to be understood by the children. And this is not authentic. It's just something that is, okay, I understand what you mean here, and this is how we have to relate to the children in class. And then I create a kind of not very authentic role where I try to play something which is approaching or in proximity to what you have just described, but it's not it. And so there is still a certain missing ingredient. It's an understanding, actually. It's an understanding what needs to be happening here. It's not the creation of yet another image or another conduit for which I communicate with others. It needs to be authentic. So this is just what I wanted to add to it. And of course, I agree to what is being described here, but understanding it in the understanding here, I mean being able to put it together in living situations is pretty challenging.
Agree. Yeah. Sasha?
Yes. I don't think I mean, I think there will be enough teachers who are still childlike, but I think a more difficult thing to do is to find the teacher in the child or in the student, because you need both in both ends of the spectrum, like this text is saying. And at the moment, I'm like, that takes time to make the students realize that they too have some sense of, or some authority or some things to share with even with the adults. And I think that's more difficult from my perspective than having adults being childish or playful.
Yeah, I agree, Sasha. I think that you make a very interesting point here, because you were reading, Marta, you were reading now this short passage where eventually this guy, the author of the book, is placing the responsibility in the hands of the adult guy, while I would vote for finding ways how to divide the responsibility in the duo of the teacher and the child, because a child in the educative pedagogical situation needs to be affirmed to be a good student. A good student meaning to be curious, to ask questions, and to be very passionate about it. So it is challenging the teacher to bring something which is authentic and new, etc. So it's like, instead of this kind of a cybernetic circle that invokes the archetype polarity that is being described in this text, we need to actually move into a different cybernetic cycle where both the teacher and the student are playing their role in a manner that is challenging each other. Yes, and of course, it's not, I don't think it's trivial, but I think that this is the way how to go about it. It's not one-sided, I would say.
Yeah. So just to kind of qualify, this book is about something different. It's like speaking about teachers on 2 pages or 4. Okay, and like it's really focusing on the understanding of this mechanism, like through understanding of archetypes, of understanding of this phenomena of this sometimes immense power of one individual over another one. And actually, it is placing responsibility on the one who is like gaining power like that. And the responsibility is for diffusing this effect if they are serious about being helpful to the other side. Okay, so it's kind of, you have to like, you feel it, feels great, and now give it back. So that's basically the point of this book. And it's like saying, yes, it feels wonderful like hell, and you are not being helpful if you contain it on just one side of the stick. Yes, so this book is about that. Yes, and it's kind of like a short and concise book about this. But I thought that this description, how the split of archetype is creating those polarities of passivity and activity, of the one responsible and the one just being processed. It's a very elegant one. How to kind of approach this description of those students sitting and being processed in a classroom, and the teacher becoming more and more serious and more kind of rigid and more annoyed, if it happens. Maybe it doesn't happen nowadays, but in my school, all teachers were like that. So I do remember this, yes. And so it's kind of like it happens, yes. And this, like the elegance of this description, how, for me, it was interesting. And I totally agree that from here to the solution, how at school, this playfulness is to be like intelligently maintained, is like a big leap. And before we like get to this other side of this leap, I have like a tour which goes like the other direction, because I became like reading this, I became actually curious about like what it means, what does it mean that people get like sucked into grips of an archetype? Like what the heck is that? Like in terms of psychology, in terms of like even like our neurobiology, what is this archetype anyhow? Like why are we caught into this? So what if you bear with me, I have like a few rounds around understandings of what we are speaking about. That will be kind of diverging from the solution, okay? But then we'll like try to wrap it up maybe with those notions. So some kind of questions that I was kind of asking myself in reading this. So like, for example, if we take this, the phenomenon of this dull, uninspired passivity that happens at schools and different other situations between people. So what is the problem? Is it like that the archetype becomes activated? What does it mean? Yes, like what does it mean? Like what is this archetype? Yes, or is it that the wrong archetype? We should be in another one. Maybe we should be like in the archetype of like being creative explorers and mad scientists rather than the teacher, like those like polarity creating archetype. Or is it that we are in the right archetype and the master and disciple is a beautiful archetype that we are actually supposed to activate, but when this dull passivity happens, it means that we are kind of falling in it wrongly. For example, with a split, and there shouldn't be a split. So the question is like how to understand the problematics happening relative to this landscape. So that was kind of like thinking, and then I started to think like, okay, so like let's understand what this archetype is. And of course, we know this gentleman here, who kind of when you speak with some of the cognitive scientists, they say, it's like, it's kind of like, so like what was the word? Fluffy, fuzzy, that like who knows what this collective unconscious is, where are those archetypes, and what is it? Yes, so but it's kind of this genre of thinking about archetypes in general that are kind of like mental, emotional constructs shared by people and somehow universal, that when they are being active, or like use this word constellated between people, they kind of, everybody knows what to do already within the logic of the archetype being activated. So it boils down to this notion that where are those archetypes residing? They are residing in the like mysterious domain called collective unconscious, and this mysterious domain is kind of like interconnected unconscious mind of people, in which, according to Jung, the human it's collective, yes, and the human collective unconscious is populated by instincts as well as archetypes, yes, and the archetypes are like, they are like very distinctly few ones that are universal for everyone. And those ancient primal symbols, such as the Great Mother or the Wise Old Man, the Shadow, the Tower, Water, the Tree of Life, and so on. So the claim would be that there are mental, emotional, cognitive structures that are primal to human psyche, shared for all humans, and kind of, you know, there. Yeah? And the question would be like, where? And I started to think about it because, you know, like when you read those descriptions, intercepted by reading, for example, all sorts of like accounts of neurobiological type of approaches to cognitive science. Of course, cognitive science likes to find kind of neurological or neurobiological explanations. What is it, this wiring that humans have? And some of the wiring is universal in the sense that we are a particular type of animal with a particular type of kind of life arrangement, that, for example, we are mammals, meaning that we have mothers, and we have like a particular experience of being, you know, cared for, and we have a particular experience of like what kind of dangers are possible, and so on. So this kind of like an experience of this kind of shape of the universal experience of being human. It is possible that it's like it can be described as collective unconscious because it's basically kind of psychobiologically embedded in the fact of being human. And actually, when you ask this question, like, do we mean collective unconscious as some kind of, you know, like a mimetic production, that because people have different stories and different symbols, some of them are so frequent that they converge and they become this kind of noospheric existence shared by humans, like a kind of aggregate culture would be one approach. And another one, it's kind of the psyche, biologically, like within the being, the particularly shaped organism with a particular type of functionalities, including social functionalities. And if you ask this question, and if you look at what, for example, Jung was saying, he was kind of oscillating between the two. And for example, like apparently, and this is something I didn't know before, there is like a whole branch of neuroscience called Jungian neuroscience, which is exactly taking this biopsychological route of an explanation and saying, yes, those animals, like there are meaning structures that are so, like, they feel archaic in their minds because they are kind of embedded in those very old parts, the kind of ancient parts of the human brain, because they are shaped by, you know, like those instincts accumulating over millions of years and so on. So this collective unconscious would be this kind of like archaic sense of intelligence of the human before the neocortex evolved and so on. There was already meaning structures that were you know, like orienting what you are supposed to do and when. And if you think about that, the sense of, for example, being a young one instructed by an old one what to do would be one of those archaic responses, yes, activated in you, and some others as well. Also, the, you know, like the situation of being attacked or afraid or running away or fighting would be one of those, and so on. So it's like animal psychology, yes, retained in the human psyche in images that we would call archetypes now, because our minds are working in images, but they are primal in their structure. So searching for this, and I know I'm kind of like walking around the question of playfulness, but I got interested, like the question that got me hooked is like, how is it that we get so sucked into an archetypal situation? Okay, that the archetypal situation can hold such a you know, powerful grip over us. Yes. So, for example, there is a book that I bought, and I don't know, like I didn't find there what I was searching for, because the book was saying that it's like tracing the neurobiology of all those archetypes. Okay. So the neurobiological imprint of the archetypes within the human organism. Yes? And the book is written by a psychiatrist and military psychiatrist, but who's like, it sounds like a PhD. I don't know if it is a PhD thesis, but it sounds like that. So he's kind of like trying to find those neurobiological correlates of archetypes. And yeah, and what it promises, like, to my mind, it doesn't really deliver. So like it's more like just as an illustration of a search to like find those archetypes, you know, like rather than actual you know, neurobiological correlates as you would expect. But it's basically what I told you, like describing that there are those, you know, those like so-called reptile brain and old mammalian, like you know, like with the evolution of the brain, and very like the meaning structure or social relation structures that have evolved before the neocortex and before the language capacity of the human being were already active on the human psyche before language. Okay, and they are retained in the sense of archetypal, what Jung would call archetypal imagery, which goes like, it is prior and deeper and stronger than concepts that we have, more kind of like newer concepts that we arrive and we evolve with language and so on. So this what he suggests is that symbols in this sense, it's not what like semiotics would be, it's not the type of symbols that semiotics would be speaking about, that it's kind of arbitrary meaning of, you know, like you have a signifier signified and the meaning and the language evolves and you can have new meanings and new symbols and so on. But those deep, you know, psychology symbols, archaic ones, also the ones that appear in dreams, in other states of consciousness and so on, those are the meaning structures that are coming from those archaic layers of the psyche. So meaning that when the description is pointing to the situation of being caught in an archetypal situation, this would mean that the human organism is thinking with very old parts of its brain. Okay, and it's kind of, you know, like being run by them. What do you think so far?
I have a lot to say about it. I don't know if we have time in the seminar. I will try to be very short. First, I don't think that I agree that the neural structures of the brain are the most appropriate domain of description for understanding what is it that we are talking about when we speak about archetypes. I think that I would search for explanations in a higher level of maybe neurodynamics or systemic interactions or systemic dynamics, which belongs more to the field of cybernetics and system theory and attractors. In this descriptive domain, archetypes can be thought about as a kind of attractors that consolidate certain patterns of systemic behavior. And in this sense, it is not necessarily something which is more archaic. It can be pretty much modern and belonging more to the domain of us making sense in a complex situation, whereas our minds or our brains are trying to minimize energy, and therefore they kind of converging into patterns that are more constant or are more repeating. So it is true that you can find archaic roots for relationship you may call master disciple, because in like in hunter-gatherer situation, I think the children are looking at the adults that are the best hunters, and they want to imitate them because they see the advantage. And so it's very natural and authentic. The relationship which is being created, I really want to know how these men or women are hunting, because they seem to bring more mammoths to the tribe, and they gain a lot of respect and stuff like this. However, so these are the more archaic roots, but this same kind of relationship is pretty much making sense also in just modern contexts. So in this sense, archetypes, I think archetypes mostly represent a certain dynamics in social situations between two people or more, and they somehow signify more stable patterns of interactions, of relating. And this is not necessarily a negative thing. I think that you posed like three different questions. Falling into the wrong archetype. What was it? Can you come back to it? Yeah. Falling into an archetype, I think it can be very positive. If you create a certain systemic dynamics of relating within a group of people, it can become very effective and full of life and creativity and potency. So I don't see a fundamental problem here. Falling into the wrong archetype is kind of this. It's like this I see as a kind of a problem that has to do with the social design. Yes, like this group dynamics, and even if it's only two people, or even if it's a single person between one and himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the most common problem that needs to be addressed is falling wrongly into an archetype. So if you fall into the wrong archetype, okay, so this is not very good, but falling wrongly into an archetype, is that something that can create those situations that are really not alive, missing energy or wasting vitality and not achieving anything in particular. So this is, if to address these three questions, I would try to think what are the archetypes that we want to install. So an organization, a social organization like a school works wonderfully and magically. So we need to be kind of summoning, invoking, or inventing the archetypes that we would like to have as guests, as constant guests in residency, as you say, and taking care that the wrong archetypes are kept in check as far as it is possible, because it's living systems and you cannot really make it very, very accurate. You can only create tendencies. And falling wrongly into an archetype, or maybe in a more affirmative manner, how to ride archetypes, or how to use them and affirm them in the best manner that we can in order to fulfill our visions and dreams. I think this is where I would like to focus in creating a culture where this is very well addressed, also as a research or as in a few perspectives. So that's how I would.
Yeah, we are having distinct functions now in this discourse, because now I want to diverge again into, because you are like it's a funny dynamics, because you are going back to the question and say, okay, but like let's speak about this arche still, archaicity. So that's
let's speak about. Sorry, can you repeat?
Archaicity versus like just like contemporaneous of those types, because like there are two more books I want to bring, which are going like still into digging what does it mean to fall into an archetype. Is it an archaic structure? Is it like whatever it is, just like kind of like to dig into this falling into a pattern still. Two more books, okay? And it just got me interested.
It's not American Gods by any.
No, it's not American Gods. It's two more. Because like to me it's fascinating how it happens, and you see, like you say that archetypes are just attractors, cognitive attractors.
They are attractors, not just attractors. They are these archaic gods being evolving with us.
Yeah, but you say it doesn't have to be archaic, and no. I would say the difference between types and archetypes is that the archetypes are archaic, okay? Like, and types meaning kind of schema or concepts, yeah, or whatever you call it, yes, kind of like scripts, cognitive scripts. This is how people usually call it. Don't have to be archaic at all, and they are like very elaborated and kind of everybody knows what to do within them. Like an example that again we had at one of the courses at the School of Thinking was a script of the restaurant. You say restaurant, which is like potentially contemporary notion, and you know what to do, how to sit, what to do with a menu, that you have to pay, that like what you are supposed to say and not say to the waiter, and so on and so on. Yes, so it's like very strongly like encoding a lot of things to do and not to do, while not being archaic potentially. Yes, it can. Okay, there can be a more contemporary example of I don't know, a smartphone app. yes, which is also a script, and you know what to. So what I just want to say is that the distinction of the archetype relative to all other cognitive attractors would be that those in this theory, like, you know, like the narrative or archetypes, is that those are very ancient meaning structure of the mind.
And why it is important they are ancient?
Because then it's like, to me it's important because then you can have multiple processes on your mind running simultaneously, one overriding the others, and they feel differently. And thank you for the question, because the next selection, like the small text from a book, is speaking about how it feels when they are archaic. Okay, so favorite. There has to be some Christopher Bolas, you know, in the presentation. So here it comes. And he's writing. It's a chapter about something else. The chapter is called "The Structure of Evil," and he's basically describing, like, how does it happen? Like, how does it feel, and how does it happen that people are doing very, very, very nasty things sometimes, and it's about serial killers, this one actually. And what he's describing is exactly like, to me, you know, like capturing this moment when what happens is that people's cognition shifts to being steered by those archaic parts of the mind, and they become kind of different cognitive systems. Okay, and he is describing it that they turn into allegories. Okay, so the text is like this: allegories thrive in authoritarian societies when those in opposition try to represent forbidden ideas in personified form. So it's about serial killers, authoritarian, like very strong kind of power dynamics and so on, that people, like, in such situations turn into those, you know, there was this book, Eliade, called Mythological Time, something like that, that people find themselves in, like, not kind of, the reality starts to be different. It's kind of like they live in a different time, as if outside of time. They live as allegories, as kind of like those, exactly as archetypes. Okay, so this would describe the situation where the brain is operating through those, like, ancient structures, something like that. So an allegorical character usually represents only one quality, virtue, sloth, seduction, faith, for example. So they like, this is why he's calling that they become allegorical. They become one embodiment of one meaning structure, one archetype. Concentrating one quality in a single character gives a greater force to that quality, but it lacks the complexity of an ordinary character who might contain all these elements. And the structure of allegory, its rigidity and lack of emotional play, bears the terms of its origin. Although allegory is an ancient narrative device, not usually regarded as a criterion of human behavior, I believe the serial killer, it's like natural that we are discussing serial killers in an educational seminar, is someone who has been allegorized. He is squeezed into an identification with one quality, evil, that obliterates other psychic qualities. As his soul departs, leaving him emptied, he identifies with the killed self, which he then distills and represents as the essence of his being. He identifies with the force of trauma, and out of his fate develops a separate sense of the work of trauma, which, like Lucifer, so he's like this, his archetype would be this, he turns into his profession, squeezing others into his frame of reference. Allegories involve compartmentalization and splitting of human qualities, and An allegorical struggle involves characters reacting on each other in an externalized conflict. The serial killer sets off a chain, and this is interesting to me. The serial killer sets off a chain of reaction in a community, and ironically, his allegorical condition is transferred to a broader allegorical structure. Community representatives are interviewed to obtain a distilled comment on this kind of evil. So church leaders speak of the theological meaning of serial killing. Psychologists talk about the malevolent psychosocial factors, and so on. So the kill, like it's what is describing that one person becoming this kind of like entering into the archetypal situation pulls everybody else into being like different like counterparts of this allegorized situation. So everyone is allegorized and plays a part in a very precise kind of a theater. Okay, and I'll move because this might be like, this might seem as, I don't know, not related very well, but like to me it was describing this kind of like a force of that, like you are not living in a kind of this complex modern reality anymore. You turn into, he uses this word allegory, you can use archetype and so on, and you become this one virtue, this one representation, this one, you know, like force. And by the fact that you are losing all those other shades of humanity or different possibilities, different ends of the pole, that would mean that you are kind of not really processing entire complexity, cognitive complexity of the situation. And now the most kind of full, to my mind, explanation of how this happens comes from the book of Wilfred Bion, Learning from Experience, and he's describing the psychological work with groups, and this is basically what I will be speaking about is the most well-known contribution to the psychological work with groups, like those therapy groups and so on that he was working with at the Tavistock Institute, and he is describing how it happens that groups kind of fall into, like I called it falling into archetypes. And he's basically describing three patterns that he observed that happen very frequently at groups. And relative to that, he describes the function of the therapist or the facilitator of the group, what is to be done relative to the archetype, like kind of sinking in, or like the group sinking into an archetype. And he's not calling that archetypes, not calling it allegories, he calls it basic assumptions, okay? And he describes three situations that when he's working like kind of on all sorts of, you know, complex psychological matters with groups, what happens very often in his view and what he observed is that three different patterns, kind of archetypal patterns that are actually described by this Jungian and neurobiology and so on, happen very often. The first one is called pairing. Okay, like it's, yeah, I think it's interesting anyhow for us working with groups. So maybe let's have a look at this, because he's saying that learning from experience means like the function of the therapist of the group is to bring the experience here and now into the attention of the group. Okay, and this were the observations, the three patterns that he was very frequently bringing to the observation, because he was kind of attentive to them to the happening. And he was giving those interpretations. And he said that the effect of interpretations was erratic. However, after a time, I thought that some patterns of behavior were recurring. And in particular, one that went like this. And this was the most frequent one. Two members of the group would become involved in a discussion. Sometimes the exchange between the two could hardly be described, but it would be evident that they were involved with each other, and that the group as a whole thought so too. On these occasions, the group would sit in attentive silence, rather surprising behavior in view of the neurotic's impatience of any activity that does not center on his own problem. Whenever two people begin to have this kind of relationship in the group, whether these two are man and woman, man and man, or woman and woman, it seems to be a basic assumption held both by the group and the pair concerned that the relationship is a sexual one. It is as if there could be no possible reason for two people's coming together except sex. The group tolerates the situation, and although knowing smiles are interchanged, the group seems prepared to allow the pair to continue their exchange indefinitely. There are exceptions, but they are not so numerous as one would imagine, considering the other individuals in the group have a good deal that they would like to say. Okay, so he's describing the otherwise possibly intelligent and creative involvement of the entire group with the task they have, kind of falling into a different social pattern, which he calls the basic assumption, which has this archetypal structure. Okay, this is what is happening now in this group, yes? So it's, instead of like the task being whatever, and he calls it the sophisticated task of the group, which would be this, like using the neurocortex and using the kind of, you know, all sorts of new concepts, the entire social system of the group falls into this archaic pattern. Now is a mating time, you know, and they can spend all days discussing, but basically kind of what neurologically or behaviorally or psychically this group is kind of witnessing and participating is this, yeah? And it's an interesting book. You can read that. The kind of like the basic assumption would be kind of like a baby, yeah? That they will come up with something that the entire group will be benefiting from. So this is the first basic assumption, and there are two others, and basically he's describing three, and the third one is the one that applies to our kind of passivity situation. The second one, fight or flight, is the assumption that the group is here together for safety, yes? So the basic assumption is that people come together as a group for purposes of preserving the group. It's common for discussions to become tiresome through preoccupation with absent members as a danger to the coherence of the group, and with present members as virtuous for being present. So it's like this investment of intelligence becomes kind of into the safety structure, psychological safety being manufactured by the very fact that the group exists, okay? And whatever the task of the group might be, the actual psychological investment will be in this kind of virtuousness by the fact of being present, all sorts of like threats to the boundary of the group and so on. And the third description that he gives is dependency, okay? And I wish now to consider the state I have described as the dependent group culture. The basic assumption in this group culture seems to be that an external object exists whose function is to provide security for the immature organism. This means that one person is always felt to be in a position to supply the needs of the group, and the rest in a position in which their needs are supplied. Okay, so and then whatever is being said is kind of like taken from those positions. That one is being pushed into the one that will like and he's very interestingly describing all sorts of kind of infantile behaviors presented by the group members, saying like complaining about all sorts of things, and a person who is like put as this kind of provider or the caretaker of the group, kind of feeling obliged to, like, you know, answer to all of them, yes, and to like and to whatever is being presented, this person like kind of like doesn't step away and say, okay, but like why is it my problem? No, this person is kind of interpersonally pushed into this role that now this one is a problem solver. And in this, what this Beyond guy is explaining is the function of the group facilitator relative to all those kind of archetypal attractors. Yes. So when you have those dynamics happening in a group, what your function is, and he calls it learning by experience. And he says that like all groups actively counterbalance because they hate learning by experience. Okay, so the learning by experience is exactly this: is bringing to their attention what is happening and turning the structure of the group from this archaic psychological setup to what he calls a sophisticated structure. Okay, if the group has to work constantly at maintaining a sophisticated structure, there must be a pull in the opposite direction towards one of the three basic structures. And it is important to view the group from that angle. Before doing so, I will refer briefly. Okay, so like what he's saying, that you can see this B side of the cube as it's kind of like a visual game, yes, that you either see the one or the other as the one in front and one in the back. And what it's kind of like an illustration what the function of the group facilitation is to pull this new complex sophisticated task to the front by showing that we are falling into the kind of the simplifying, archaic things that kind of pulls us in, and we really, once we get into that, we spend a lot of time in that, and we are not being intelligent enough. That's the input from this group. So from this book. So I don't know if it's helpful or not, but it's as I said, it's, to me it was more like a kind of like a chain of associations in terms of like what would it mean that we really are able like to be this sophisticated structure that doesn't fall into the grips of archetypal social dynamics. And if you think about, and then what kind of comes to my mind is something that we've been discussing actually in the game thinking class at the School of Thinking, how complex playing is, that you see and like you are like in a situation, but not like as, like for example, if you take this game, yeah, the game, like playing is an activity of intelligent animals, yes, and the more intelligent, the more playful they are, yes. So if you like kind of superimpose this cube situation on it, it's like both, yes, you can see it as we are being nice, and we are fighting, and it happens simultaneously, yes. So there is this, they are kind of engaging with this archaic and archetypal structure of the fight in a sophisticated social structure, which contains this archaic one. Yes, so you have both kind of sides of the cube present simultaneously very nicely. You have it also in humans. Yes. That it's like more than one frame present simultaneously, yes, and there is so as if this brain is able to kind of bring scripts in simultaneity, yes, and like which kind of like brings back these two poles of the archetype, or archetype and something else, into like cognitive capacity of the group simultaneously. Yes, or like this. Yes, you have adults in a kind of official, professional activity, pretending to be other adults in a different situation. Yes, so and it's called a play, actually, what they are doing. Yes? So all this kind of simultaneity, that archetypes are engaged, but with a surplus of intelligence that is elaborating this archetype, would probably be hinting towards an intelligent play, as this ability not to be kind of sucked into passivity. And we could be also doing that. And in this description of this seminar, I have also placed there the description of the registrar role at the Buckminster College, which is pointing to overqualification. And I think like now kind of like to try to wrap together all the things that have been said, including this multi-layered sophistication of playfulness and cognitive ability of people to be playful and simultaneously serious and simultaneously actually deliver high quality job and simultaneously, engage with archetypes. This would mean that this would give an interesting kind of elaboration of what this overqualification means. It's not that you have like other job capabilities that are not being used on your job. No, it's like, like it's those layers of the mind, active and engaged and utilized simultaneously, while, for example, you are filling in like, I don't know, like registrar. So what you are doing. So that's the that's the chain of associations I wanted to present. So what do you think? Does it come together into something?
The Brian theory seems always to start from a leadership, from a certain point of leader, where the dependency, the pairing, the fight flight concept always is starting from the concept of there is a leader and other people follow, or other people are dependent, or do you consider in this relevancy between the concept of that Brian decided or descriptive and what we are looking for in this type of typology of being a teacher? Is this leadership important, or is it more leveled, like on the same level?
It's not necessarily the leader, because like, yes, he's speaking from the perspective of the therapist, and actually, like, it's actually Bion who said that for a sophisticated group there has to be a group facilitator, but it's a different thing than a leader in this kind of pairing or this particularly this dependency. He doesn't like this dynamics of dependency at all, which is a very classical leadership situation, that everybody kind of like, sits and waits. But then he says that if there is no psychology present in the room in terms of ability to facilitate a group process, very soon a basic assumption kicks in and the group falls into this dynamics. Okay, so it would be a difference, two different meaning of leadership. One would be the one on which the role of this dependency structure will be kind of hooked, and they, good luck for them, because it's like it's a nasty situation that never, like, you're never able to provide this to a group. Yes. And another would be more kind of like a leadership of being able to facilitate the work in a group such that the group remains sophisticated or gains this ability for being actively, intellectually, engaged and thinking together. And he's actually speaking about the ability of a group to think together instead of falling into these assumptions and perpetuating. Does this answer the question of the
Yeah. But, because I was, if you I was thinking about these archetypes. So the archetype system of Jung is very interesting. I really like that. And the fun thing is that if you look further and you read about these different archetypes, it connects a lot to what we are, or to what you are creating in terms of the roles of people, like the magister and because there's also a wizard. There's I don't know them by heart at all, but there are different roles that are very, very similar to what we seem to create within the Buckminster College. And then I was looking for it, but I didn't find it exactly. There is somewhere a text that connects those archetypes to teaching capacities. So every archetype has some teaching capacities as well, and this is an interesting approach in mind from my point of view. Then I'm still
like what we are thinking is kind of like I think how it comes about is because we are thinking about those kind of magical, like figures, yes, and those are archetypes, of course, yeah. So this is how it kind of comes back, yes. The thing is that they as we see, they have an immense power, yes, and immense ability to put people on autopilot, yeah. And if it puts people on autopilot, one is kind of pushed to do all the work, another one is like a bunch of others are sitting and waiting, and all sorts of things can be happening that are already, problematic. No?
I think it all starts with individuals, and not this observation of Bion are made about the group dynamics. Probably also speaks about the individuals, and I think this prospect of being a sophisticated group, it starts with the individuals. It's like particles in a dynamic system, and when you think about collapsing of a complex dynamism into simplistic attractors, sometimes it takes only one individual within the group in order to pull down the whole group into this simplistic attractors. So this is why I put the emphasis about the individuals. And this might be a regretful situation, but it seems to me that there is no way around. Now, if to focus on individuals, the way that I understand it, and you started to mention it about this, you mentioned this playing the game. But since you have chosen to focus on this archetypal kind of context, it is not true, I believe, that archetypes are all powerful and godly and like collective, and individuals are actually only cogs in the machines and are actually powerless against it. I think that there is a very, very interesting balance, and this is why I mentioned before this American gods, because I think that this author, Neil Gaiman, in a literary manner, he makes a very good work in making it clear that the archetypes and the gods are being fed by our vitality. So once we deprive them of this vitality, they need worshippers. And once they are deprived from worshippers and the vitality that individual minds provides them, they actually they become weak and sometimes non-existent even. So if to use a bit more metaphorical thinking here, I think there is in the domain of individuals, there are ways and methods of how to negotiate and play with the archetypes. Meaning, if I become conscious aware to the complex relationships that I have with archetypes at large, I can gain a certain degree of freedom while assigning whatever vitality that I have at my disposal towards this or that archetype at different times, and be quick enough psychologically and emotionally in order to navigate between this assignment of vitality, which is actually the thing that evokes or brings these archetypes into an active role in our minds, or also in the mind of a group. And I want to add one more thing to this kind of depicting a relationship of negotiation, of ongoing negotiation between human individuals in their own minds and also collectively, versus this active, more or less active archetypes. It seems to me that this is again something to do with the balance that we can create in our minds, in our conscious mind, between significance and freedom, where freedom is the state that we have and own all our vitality, and we are able to assign it to whichever idea, whichever archetype, whichever direction we have in our mind. And when we do this, this freedom begets the shape of significance or meaningfulness in our life. And this is something that this is the main thing that we get from archetypes, whether we like it or not. We get significance in our actions, significance in our doings, etc. So again, this state of negotiation between individual minds and archetypes is also this play, which is in a bit more abstract manner, is the play that we are able to play consciously between freedom and significance. And the currency of this play is our vitality. Yes, it's our life. It's what we are doing, how we are doing, and this involves everything. It involves doing, it involves activities, it involves thinking, it involves movement of our bodies, etc., etc. So this is all.
Yeah. Yeah, but this kind of vitality and freedom, you see, like it's just the opposite end of the spectrum of this kind of potential meaning of playfulness that we could assign, thinking about, like, you know, in this dichotomy, seriously working versus, like, you know, this kind of goofy playfulness, you know, like being stupid, relaxed, and just, you know, like doing whatever. It's just the opposite. Yes, it's like it's so complex and so many levels of awareness. It's mostly inner awareness, like what you are falling into, all sorts of patterns, where they are coming from, what they make you do. Yes, and then those like it's like this cake with those layers that, like, what how many things you need to be aware of, and kind of it's be able to play as if in an orchestra. Yes, that which one you will signify, which one you will express, which one you will not express, on which level of coordination you will kind of blink to a member of a group, and on which level you will kind of suppress the flow between us. Yes, and so on and so on, so that the entire, like, effect on the group will be this you know, like awakened, creative, actual doing the task that we are supposed to be doing. Yes,
yes. I also would like to add that in terms of facilitation, I think that under certain conditions that can be achieved, a group can be self-facilitating. Yes, it definitely involves a certain very deep allowance between the members of the group just to be reflective one in relation to the others. But I think that the facilitation can be made like a self-maintaining function, and maybe I'm a bit careful to say that it has to do with the culture which is being created within the group, but I think it has some very deep connection to the culture, the patterns that are being operated. Children are doing it all the time. Yes, when they play, they take the roles very seriously, and on the same time, simultaneously, they can change the game, change the roles, and change everything. The policeman become the pirates, the pirates becomes the policeman, the doctors becomes patients, the patients becomes doctor, and they all the time switch, but in the very short periods when they are playing the role, they are playing it extremely seriously, and they also reproach each other if this is not being the case. So, and I think in children plays there are quite a few hints to how it can work also in adult.
Yeah, but simultaneously they do enact this other side of the kind of pole of being children in this room. Yes. So they are they have not like turned into those princesses totally, yes, because like if there is like choco milk coming in, you know, and the mother asks like, do you want? Like, yeah, I want. It's like it's just, you know, like very easily, like they are still there, yes, as like, so this holding simultaneously several frames is
yeah.
But I also think that's what you say, Marta, very important to realize that it's about letting go of possible outcomes. Yes. Then you create the freedom to play and to be creative. And I think the role of the facilitator or the teacher should incorporate something like that the outcome should not be fixed. Like the children in this picture, they gather all these tools and they say, now we're gonna play, you know, a little tea party. They do not expect a certain result. And I think as a teacher, it's about, you have to have the experience to create a situation like that, suppressing when it's necessary or winking, like you said. But how to say it?
Simultaneously, you see like the complexity of the situation, that this is one layer of the cake, and another one is that we do want results, and we want the educational outcomes, and we want the exams to be passed, and we want homework to be done, and this doesn't invalidate the other layer, which is like, you see like how many things are need to be like kind of contained simultaneously and enabled psychologically. Yeah?
But I think
not that one, like the reality collapses only to one layer.
But then the experience comes in, I think, like only by trying and doing and
yeah. But the experience, like it's kind of, it can go in either direction. You can have a teacher like of 30 years of experience who just basically has collapsed into one of the layers like 29 years ago. So, and we'll say that I'm a super experienced teacher. I you know, like always get the results. So it's like this awareness, active awareness of all those things, including learning what else is to be paid attention to. Yes, and kind of speaking about those dimensions that we haven't spoken about of the social dynamics, let's say, yes, or kind of like what else, like how else we can, like what else we can observe in a situation simultaneously.
I'm just wondering, is it your your expectation to create a certain kind of framework around it, or a best practice, or where do you
no, certainly not today. Today we are already like, you know, like we have finished our time slot, but in general, like what I believe we are about is being an organization that kind of can proudly claim and like believe and deliver what it's saying, that we are not a collapsed culture in the sense of like being a, you know, like dead bodies in the chairs, yeah. Mm-hmm. That we are like with this high academic excellence, there is a matching, you know, like degree of like this high aliveness and creativity, and it's not either or, it's both, yes. Which means like, which points to this like psychological overqualification. Can we like pull it off together, like, you know, simultaneously? Yeah?
I think it's a very cool exercise what we did today, because it's like we are connecting this concept of a teacher with this contemporary psychoanalysis, psychology theory. But what I would be very interested in is to see it from even a more broader perspective, and also taking Eastern thoughts or Eastern system thinking into account when creating this because I have the impression that we're like creating an archetype of the teacher. I don't know if it's the right way of how to pronounce it, but today we were looking from a very Western point of view, with Carl Jung, with this Brian, they all started from a very Western point of view. But there's also the Eastern thought, where you're not emphasized on the self, but on the no self, and not as such. It's less theorized, but more experience based, I think, and I think we should do the same exercise with other approaches, not only the Western approach, but also from like a Taoist point of view, a Buddhism point of view, because teaching as such, teaching as a practice, is as old as humanity, and I think we could have very interesting insights and very interesting connections as well, based on those those different parameters that we might find in those different approaches as well.
Yeah, definitely. You know, like don't take what like my selection as kind of like a proposal, like how we are approaching those things. It's like one pebble in a river. You know, it's thinking about this question. This is what I got interested in. You know, like what kind of understandings are kind of implied there, can be looked into, where like, of course, it's not a complete set, absolutely not, and not even approaching the question how to do it. It's just kind of starting to understand what at least one layer of the complexity involved. Not more.
When I look at it from the other side, like in playing the devil's advocate and creating like a job opening for a teacher at the Buckminster College, and when we consider everything that we were talking about, I sometimes fear that that there's only one person, or even no person in the whole world, will be able to find himself into this teaching position, based on all the parameters that we are looking for. So this is a bit of a fear that I have. On one side, I have the idea of, okay, wow, this is really fantastic, and this is what a teacher should be. But on the other hand, I fear that we will not find people who are feasible to all these different parameters we are looking for, because it's sometimes look in my profession. If I look at the job openings, they're looking for someone who can do everything, and who is able to do everything, and who has the mindset of even like a leader, but also somebody who follows, and somebody a pleaser, and it should be this and that and that and that and that. So there's like an octopus of mindsets that you should have to be able to attend this job opening. So this is something that we also, from my point of view, have to take into account, that it can be very cool on paper, but we have to find people who see themselves in these roles perfectly fitted in a way.
I think the primary function of such descriptions is to pull out people who are attracted by those descriptions, you know, because it's, I don't think that you like organizational culture of the type that we want, or at least we are discussing that we potentially want, can be embodied in one person, you know, but it's like, what kind of conversations are being held, and like what is the range of like sensibilities that are being addressed in those conversations creates the range of sensibilities in the team members. Yes, and it's not that like each person, it's a matter of awareness. Yes, and kind of like what are you observing, what are you being attentive to, what are you willing to look into and learn about, and so on and so on, rather than the description that this is like the, you know, like the job description. And speaking of job descriptions, the register one, you know, to me, it's kind of like a magnet type of a device, yes, that like who will be attracted to such a crazy description, you know? And like, to me, this says a lot, you know?
Yeah, but this is important that when we bring it to practice, that we consider it as a magnet. I like the word magnet a lot, but it should also be described like a magnet, like being, like this is what we're looking in this ear.
But
spectrum.
does it have to be described as a magnet? Because for me, like, I understand this function of recruitment such that the person who comes will know it's a magnet and will say, aha, okay. I get you. Yes. So
yeah, it's the reason why people go to the school of thinking as well. They didn't read anything, but they were all attracted from a certain thing. Yeah, I